Happy Mother's Day, everybody. It is our, I believe, 8th or 9th week doing this, so I'm in a slightly new space, but that's because we're trying to get the other space fully worked out, and anyway, we're trying something new this week, so hopefully we'll be able to start making plans to get back in the building if and when it becomes kind of safe to do that. And as we have always said, we're going to go with what we consider to be the most prudent and wise health suggestions and guidelines that are available. We just care too much about folks not to do that. I get to talk to you this month, the month of May, which is our month of stewardship. And I was excited last week for the Ballantine people to do their event, and now it's my turn. And I'm going to talk a little more explicitly today about stewardship and what that means. And luckily, it happens to be Mother's Day. And you may not think that stewardship and motherhood match up very well, but I promise you that they really do. So first, let's talk about what stewardship is and why it is related in some way to motherhood, or motherhood could be considered a form of stewardship. So stewardship works on a couple of different levels. One, it is an explanation of how people govern themselves, but also it is a theological concept about how human beings are supposed to walk in this world. If we think about the steward, the ancient concept of the steward is the most important person in a kingdom aside from the king, or aside from the queen, or aside from the ruler. Because the steward's job is to make sure that everything works the way it's supposed to. And the interesting thing about the steward is the steward actually owns nothing. It is complete responsibility without the benefit of ownership. So if the king were to go missing, the steward's job would be to remain in place. And for the ancient Hebrews, this was a really interesting concept in general, because if we remember, historically speaking, in Mesopotamia and in Egypt and in the Near East, the king, or Pharaoh, was a god. And both Upper and Lower Egypt belonged to Pharaoh. And everything that happened in that land fell under the purview of the Pharaoh. Not entirely unlike when we remember back to Yertle the turtle. If we remember, Yertle the turtle believed that he controlled all that he could see. And so did the Pharaoh in Egypt. And so did the Assyrian kings. And so did the Babylonian kings. And so did the Persian kings. And it wasn't until many, many hundreds of years later that anyone began to not understand the world as possession by the king. Now, for the Hebrews, this was a different scenario because they had no king. At least for a long time they didn't have a king. And so who owned everything? Well, the person who owned everything in their concept was the divine, was God. But the idea was that no human being had the right to own well, anything, really. They did have the right to control something. They did have the right to possess it. They did have the right to control the way things were done, but they weren't actually owning. And that was one of the interesting things that I was reading about this week and that a rabbi was teaching, which I didn't know, was that there is no word in biblical Hebrew for ownership. Not ownership in the way that we as English speakers use the term ownership. Although I will say that property rights, and I did learn this as a lawyer, should often be considered a bundle of sticks, because when we say we own something, we oftentimes don't actually have exclusive right to it. If we think about it, I own my car, but there's only a limited amount of places that I can drive it. My doctor can prescribe to me a set of drugs that might help me to get over an illness, but I can't use those drugs any way I want to. I have to use them the way they were prescribed. I have to keep them in the bottle that they were given to me in, and I have to dispose of them in a particular way. So even when I go to buy the drugs don't belong to me in the sense that I have total control over them. My car doesn't belong to me in the sense that I have total control over them. And that brings us as well to children, right? I'm responsible for my children. And in the sense they belong to me, but I don't really own them. Not in the sense that we want to, as if we have control over everything. So that's what the steward is. The steward is a person who has absolute responsibility, but no ownership. And when we talk about stewardship of the earth is an example that we might think of. We were talking about the pagan traditions last time, and Gaia is often seen as the goddess of the earth. So in that theological concept, ownership of the earth would be somehow ownership of the divine, and it wouldn't make any sense at all. In fact, the divine generally is understood in most cases as having a higher possession than someone below them. But there is some interplay between those two things. So how does this all come down to Mother's Day? Specifically, it comes down to the title of my reflection today, which is Mother as a Verb. We don't tend to think of mother as a verb. We tend to think of mother as a noun. My mother, your mother, our mother. Mother walked to the store. Mother brought me a present. I brought mother a present. And that's all true. Our mothers are our beginnings. They are our source, from which we sprung, to which we may owe everything if we go back far enough. And yet, for some of us, that bond was broken a long time ago. For others of us, it continues. But what makes the power of a mother is not exclusively in our own Genesis, or in any Genesis, although that is an amazing, amazing thing. What makes Mother powerful is the ongoing act of caring and love and responsibility. That part of taking care of and fostering, the fostering of growth of an individual, the fostering of human flourishing in an individual because of the act of mothering. That is where the true power of mother is. And so mother is, quite frankly, well beyond the originator of us. Anyone can mother. Anyone can bring the power of that relationship to us. And to those who mother, our debt is significant. But our mother can be our biological mother. They can be our foster mother. They can be our grandmother or our aunt. Mother is not defined by gender. Those who identify as male can certainly mother. Those who identify in some other gender form can mother. But mothering requires two things. First, mothering requires the exercise of authority for the benefit of someone else in order to see their flourishing. And the second thing that mothering requires is a desire not to possess, but to promote independence. All of the good mothers in this world know there will be a time when their guiding hand will have to come off their child. And it's what complicates our relationship, because mothers have invested deeply in their children. And yet, at the end of the day, it isn't with the expectation of payback. It is a grace. It is a gift. That is actually what mothering is. So, on this day, when we recognize those individuals that have mothered us all, we are really recognizing the stewards of our lives. Most likely, we are recognizing the first steward of our life. But it is not the person who necessarily gave life to us that we recognize. All of us have been mothered in some way by at least one person. And many of us have been mothered by many, many people. And it is today that we recognize that gift that we have been given. And it is the example of those who chose to mother, who chose to give of themselves for the benefit of another, that we honor. Today we recognize the first steward of our life. And today we are all given the opportunity to take that example and to be one who mothers. This is what I mean when I say mother is a verb. Regardless of anything that's happened in your life, regardless of circumstance, you are blessed as a human being with the opportunity to mother. And may we all take that opportunity and do something amazing with it. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. Blessings go with you. Thanks for watching The Reflection. The Unitarian Universalist Church of Greeley puts full services online every Sunday at 10 o'clock Mountain Time on this channel. If you liked The Reflection, please do like it here. And if you want to share it more broadly, please do so using the link below. Up here is where there are more reflections that might be of interest to you, and below is a video that YouTube thinks you'd like to watch. Thank you for being with us. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comments section. Hope to see you next time.